If you've been following this series, one surefire way to get named to the AJC's top 12 villains in Atlanta sports history is to get in the way of the team of the 90s. The Atlanta Braves, despite being in prime position multiple times, only brought home one World Series trophy. Coming off that title, as favorites to repeat in 1996, they fell short largely because of a pivotal performance by a Yankees backup catcher in Game 4. Braves closer Mark Wohlers, who hadn't given up a run that postseason, battled this catcher at the plate only to give up a game-tying 3-run home run in the 8th inning. The Yankees won in 10 innings, and the Braves never led again in the series. Atlanta had to wait until October 26, 2021, or Game 1 against Houston, for its next win in a World Series game. Our number 4 villain in Atlanta sports history is the man who turned the tide, Jim Leyritz. Joining me now is our AJC sports columnist, Mark Bradley. Mark, what epitomizes Jim Leyritz as an Atlanta sports villain?
In effect, he took the title of Team of the '90s from the Braves and gave it to the Yankees. We didn't know that at the time, but that's what it ended up being. The Braves were up 2-1 in the series. They were up 6-0 in Game 4 here at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. If they'd won that night, they would have been able to clinch their second consecutive title in the last game at the old stadium, which was going to be torn down after the Olympics. And it just seemed perfect up until the point where it wasn't. And the 6-0 lead disappeared in increments. Denny Nagel, the starting pitcher, gave up 3 in the 6th inning. Then Mike Bielecki came in and stopped the bleeding, as they say, and he worked through the 7th, and then Bobby Cox brought in Mark Wohlers, who had closed out the World Championship the year before with a 1-2-3 9th inning against a tremendous hitting team, Cleveland, and who had been an excellent closer for several years. He brought him in to work the 8th and the 9th, a 6-out save, and it didn't work. The Yankees got 2 scratch hits. One of them was totally inadvertent, a swinging bunt, and they had 2 guys on. And then Wohlers had a hard time finding a pitch that he liked to Leyritz, who had entered the game as a pinch hitter, and he threw a slider on the fateful pitch, his 3rd best pitch, and Leyritz, who might not have been able to get ahead of Wohlers' fastball, he got ahead of the slider, and he wasn't a pull hitter, but he hit this one over the left field wall almost at the foul pole. Andrew Jones made a famous leap to try to get the ball and almost did, but didn't. And all of a sudden the game's tied. And the Braves lose in extra innings. They get shut out the next night by Andy Pettitte. They go back to New York. Maddox gives up a run-scoring triple to Joe Girardi, the Yankees' other catcher. And the Team of the '90s, the Team of the '90s, which Bob Costas had bestowed on the Braves after they beat Cleveland, was in transition because the Yankees would win again in 3 of the next 4 years.
You were at this game, right?
I was.
What was it like watching that, covering it, being there, watching this moment?
We'd seen a lot of weird things over the years with Braves postseason. This was their 4th trip to the World Series in the '90s, so we'd seen stuff happen. But that one, the Braves had fallen behind 3-1 in the LCS against St. Louis, and they outscored St. Louis 32-1 over the next 3 games. Then they go to Yankee Stadium and they win 12-1 and 4-0. So they're basically destroying teams at the highest level of baseball.
Right.
And you think, not going to lose again, and then
it probably felt that way.
Somebody that I recall wrote that the Braves, we pretty much settled the World Series, and the question is where the Braves are fitting into history. And this person wrote that they are surely the best team of the post-free agency era, and they're one of the greatest teams ever. And this one, some people actually still remember this, and so do I. It's fair to ask if, you know, this isn't to say that the Braves are the caliber of the 27 Yankees, but you wonder how the 27 Yankees would have hit against this pitching. That was the Ruth Gehrig team, the greatest team of all time. And that one's the one people never let me forget. And I remember going on with Francesa and the Mad Dog in New York after the World Series. Boy, you were wrong, weren't you? Yeah, I was wrong. But yeah, I mean, they looked like as good a team as I'd ever seen. I wasn't alive in 1927, but you know, I'd seen some pretty good ones. I mean, the Reds and the Dodgers of the '60s, and you know, they're pretty good teams. Cardinals, Orioles, but they were just at a higher level, and then they weren't. You would think that the Braves, who had gone through a whole lot in the postseason, losing some excruciating games in '91 and the Game 7, and Game 6 in '92, you know, you would think that they could have shrugged off that one game, but they didn't. Everything was different. The next night, it was like, even though the game between Pettit and John Smoltz, Game 5, even though that ended 1-0, it just felt like that was going to end 1-0 to the Yankees if they'd played all night, because it was just something, you know, something had been lost in Game 4, and that's contrary to baseball. Baseball is always, you know, momentum is tomorrow's starting pitcher. Well, the Braves had the guy who would win the 1996 Cy Young pitching in the next game, and he threw a great game. They just didn't score. And then they go back to New York. The Yankees were pretty sure when they left New York after Game 2 that they wouldn't be back. All of a sudden, they're back with a chance to win it.
Back with a vengeance.
And they won it on Saturday night. And, you know, the Braves, they reached one more World Series that decade and got swept by the Yankees in '99. But again, that's the whole thing. After that, it was like you always expected in the postseason up until Game 4 and the Leyritz home run that the Braves would figure something out.
Pull it out.
Yeah, you know, they've pulled out the Sid Bream game, the Francisco Cabrera game. I mean, yeah, they've done a lot of stuff.
Right.
But it was after that everything changed, and Chipper Jones told me, you know, a decade later, he said, you know, my dad and I were talking, and he said, Jim Leyritz stole Team of the '90s from you, and he did, because that was just that was the turning point to end all turning points.
And I was going to ask you, because the Yankees won it in '96, '98, '99, 2000, and the Braves, that was kind of a turning point for those two franchises, wasn't it?
I've wondered over the years, what happens if the Braves win that World Series in 5 games? That was the first time the Yankees had been to the series in many years, and they were owned by George Steinbrenner. He might have gotten mad at Joe Torre and said, okay, I'm firing you right now. We're going to bring in somebody else. I mean, he went through managers. But no, I mean, obviously he kept Joe Torre, and they won 4 out of 5. And that was right about the time that people were saying, well, since they've added the wild card, the wild card had first been used in '95, that the postseason was a crapshoot. Well, it was, except for the part where the Yankees kept winning. Right. You know, that kind of
except for that constant.
Yeah, except for that, yeah. And the Braves, you know, the Braves would just, you know, they lost. What happened after that was the Braves got really good at watching other teams celebrate at Turner Field, because that happened in '97, that happened in '98, that happened in 2000. I mean, it happened 02, 03, and 04. I mean, it's just
happened
like,
a lot.
Yeah, it's like, you know, what does this team have to do to even win a series now? And up until then, the Braves had been, you know, pretty good in postseason. 4 World Series in 6 years, and 1 title and what should have been a second one.
Mark, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks to all of you for watching. Make sure you follow along as the AJC counts down the top 12 villains in Atlanta sports history.